The truth will set you free. The truth will set you free.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. I'm doing something a little bit different for the In Search of Truth installment this time, and I really had a lot of thoughts to kind of gather as I was processing this topic. And so if you're watching the video version, unfortunately, you'll probably see me reading a lot more obviously than usual. Anyway, in the last 5 years, I've had the tendency to develop the post-Christmas blues as vacation comes to an end and I resume what often feels like the slog of life. Now, don't get me wrong, I know that I have a ton to be grateful for, but I tend to focus on the negative. I think to myself, well, here comes another year where I'm going to fail a bunch more in ministry, fail in creativity, fail as a husband, as a dad, as a friend, and most of all as a follower of Christ. And I think about how death or pain or tragedy are headed my way, either shockingly soon or inevitably later. And I wonder if God will really show up when those times come and I need him most, or if I will at some point be overwhelmed by despair amidst deep loss. I mourn the fact that I still haven't developed the trust in God that I want to have, which for some people seems to come so easily. As the lyrics of a worship song in my church this last Sunday expressed, all this pain, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder if my life will really change at all. Now, of course, these thoughts and feelings aren't unique to early January. They are more predictable and pronounced for me after the highs of the Christmas season, but I have them peppered throughout the year. That's just kind of where my mind goes. I have a tendency toward dark thoughts and a rich imagination with which to apply my dark thoughts. But I'm also alternating throughout the year with other times feeling energized and hopeful and alive in the current of God's grace and purpose for my life. Or other times, it's not these extremes all the time. It's a lot of times it's this simple, steady contentment with the plodding of life. I am a very inconsistent creature, though, in pursuit of the consistent contentment that endures through varying circumstances and emotions. The mysterious and misunderstood contentment that English translations of Scripture call joy. Now, joy is not as simple as some have made it out to be. Both intellectually and practically, the most brilliant and sanctified Christians in history have struggled to understand and obtain joy. So I won't pretend to understand it very well, but I think I've determined a few things it is not that have helped me to at least start experiencing my early January emotions in a way that's a little closer, I suspect, to God's intentions for me. Now, Philippians 4:4 says to rejoice in the Lord always, and we are told repeatedly in the Psalms to be joyful. But many of those same Psalms express grief or anguish or longing. So we can't assume that living in the joy God wants us to have means always being in a positive, happy mood. In the Old Testament, it's very common to see prophets and psalmists in decidedly unhappy moods, while also very much being in line with God's desire for them in those moments. The Book of Ecclesiastes is the Spirit-led, God-honoring journal of someone completely disenchanted with life and struggling with a depressed outlook on everything. And if that all isn't enough to convince you, Jesus, our model for living life in this broken world, was often sad. In fact, the Messiah was predicted in Isaiah 53 to be a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, it says. So should we expect to have a different and better experience of this life than Jesus? Well, I don't think so. John 15:20 in the ESV has Jesus saying, "Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you." So the nature of how this world treats me and what my life experience is it's very naturally going to be a similar path for you. Luke 9:23 in the ESV, Jesus says, and he said to all, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." The language of taking up a cross is intense there. It implies great suffering as we follow Jesus. But I think more commonly for many of us, that cross is just the daily trudge uphill through discouragement or feelings of futility or fear, anxious thoughts. For many of us, that daily cross we take up is this undercurrent of sadness we carry with us as we mourn just the nature of the status quo in life. But our sadness and mourning is not meant to leave us jaded or feeling defeated. Jesus never reached that point in his sadness and suffering. He fully experienced the sadness, but never had a defeated outlook. And that seems to be, to me, because he kept in his mind both his present purpose and God's assured plan for the future. He was realistic about this life. In John 18:36, when he was heading toward crucifixion, he acknowledged, "My kingdom is not of this world." He was not expecting an easy or pleasurable life. And along with that, he kept his focus on his purpose and its outcome. The author of Hebrews in chapter 12, verse 2, when talking about Jesus, said that for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame. Despising meaning that he thought little of the shame he experienced. He didn't give weight to it because he knew it was in service to God's loving and rescuing purpose that would not be thwarted despite what his circumstances looked like. It reminds me of the way Superman is portrayed in the movie Man of Steel. Now, I know that Man of Steel is a divisive take on Superman. If you didn't like Man of Steel, stick with me. I don't think you have to like Man of Steel in order to track with me and hopefully get something from this. I recently purchased the Man of Steel soundtrack. I love that movie. I wanted to have the soundtrack so I could listen to it while I was taking down and packing up all of our, taking down Christmas lights, packing up all of our decorations, which is just an unpleasant chore that I always try to finish in one day. We call it closing ceremonies. We freaking rip that Band-Aid off and get it all done in one day. And I knew I wanted to have something inspiring in my ears throughout that day. And I remembered finding Hans Zimmer's score for Man of Steel to be among the most inspiring I'd ever heard in a movie. So I bought it for that, for the quote-unquote inspiration factor as I'm taking down lights and doing chores and stuff. What I didn't anticipate was how listening to that score while pushing through the day would actually have a spiritual impact on me that brought tears to my eyes several times and helped align my outlook, I think, more with God's. Throughout the day, the musical score reminded me of the themes of Man of Steel, intended or otherwise, at least the parallels, that exist whether they're intended by the creators or not. The parallels between Superman as he's portrayed in that film and Jesus during his earthly ministry. The most intense and heroic parts of that score use this ascending line, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, you might remember it a little bit, that implies pushing through resistance and overcoming obstacles. It's not a theme that suggests the victory is done and the celebration has started, kind of like one of the themes of John Williams' Superman, bum ba 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 ba, yay, we won, It's not that kind of theme. It suggests again that triumph itself is the triumph itself is embedded in the process of enduring the uphill battle. That the struggle and the victory are kind of one and the same. That's what Superman was facing in that movie. He did the right thing, but it wasn't easy. And it came with great cost that required sober, almost mournful endurance. There are even a few moments where the musical theme climbs and then bursts open into a sort of culminating beauty that also sounds tragic. This was the music used during Superman's greatest moments of sacrifice in Man of Steel and was used again in the moment depicting his ultimate sacrifice in Batman vs. Superman. It's not merely loss and tragedy being expressed in that bit of score, but loss and tragedy that's motivated by love with noble responsibility, and that results in a desperately needed rescue and the defeat of evil. That's the kind of moment that music is used for and syncs up with. And throughout Man of Steel, at key moments involving the decision to endure, The quiet piano version of Superman's theme is used to accompany memories of the Kent farm and Clark's childhood, specifically those things that represent formative foundations that have shaped his view of his own life and his purpose. As I took down lights and prepared to resume the normal everyday slog, I was reminded that in this story, Superman is a reflection of Christ in a number of ways. Jesus and Superman as he is in this movie are not smiling heroes. They are men of sorrow, committed to the climb because of the end it brings, willing to sacrifice greatly because of the purpose they know it serves, and who take quiet moments away from the busyness to recenter themselves on foundational truths. Now, Superman falls far short of being a representation of Jesus. But so do I. And much more than Superman can ever be, or certainly is intended to be, I am meant to be a reflection of Jesus. I am meant to follow the template that he established with his life, willingly entering into the slog of my life because there is victory and purpose even in the seemingly futile slog itself. Many times I'm not going to be able to see it. Many times I don't. But we are promised that it is there, and that the role we truly play in this world that goes unrecognized right now will one day be revealed. Romans 8:28 in the ESV says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things, even the slog, even the monotony, even our struggles with anxious thoughts and worries about tomorrow that seem to just always be on top of us, all the sins that we're just tired of falling into again and again and again and just being a part of our ingrained personality, all those struggles that we're enduring, all of it, work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." 2 Corinthians 4:17 through 18 in the ESV says, "For this light and momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal." Romans 8:18 and 19 in the ESV says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time," this is written by Paul, who, I won't go through his resume, but he was very acquainted with suffering, unlike you and I are ever likely to experience, both in intensity and frequency. This guy knew suffering. And he said, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God." That's us as believers. And just a little bit later in Romans 8:22 and 23 in the ESV, it says, "For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now." So this pain that is in anticipation of something new. He goes on to say, "And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies," the end of this mess and the beginning of a beautiful, immortal life. It's the purpose and hope God has given us that we are meant to focus on as we trudge through the slog of life. And in doing that, we can remain undefeated even as we experience the sadness of mourning the status quos of this life. So the beginning of this January has been significantly different for me than the past few. As I return to some of those routines of life that feel like a futile slog without purpose, I'm seeing in those very feelings and activities the opportunity, if I'll be aware of it and take advantage of it, enter into it, the opportunity to carry out the victorious purpose that will someday be seen and celebrated. If you'd like some help finding a good church in your area, I would love to help you do that if I can. Online resources and communities are good supplements, but by nature they just can't speak to your particular situation like relationships in a local church can. The context for almost everything in the New Testament assumes that we're serving and building purposeful relationships in a local church. So whether you're in a church that just kind of lacks Bible-based intentionality or maybe not attending any church at all, if I can help you get connected connected to an authentic, compassionate, Bible-oriented church, I want to do that. You can email me at paeter@spiritblade.com, and we can look at some websites of churches in your area together.